The debacle surrounding the construction of the National Children's Hospital continues. At the weekend, we learned that the hospital's completion date will be missed yet again. We're now looking at a completion date of 2026, and we can't even be sure of that. A report from KPMG reported this morning calls into question if the hospital will be ready to open even when it is built. There are fears about gaps in staffing and senior leadership teams and a lack of clarity regarding the future operating model and resourcing of the hospital. On the watch of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, the biggest investment in health infrastructure in the history of the state has descended into complete farce. Never-ending delay, an ever-growing massive overspend and zero accountability. Nobody in government can say for certain when the hospital will open its doors or what the final bill for the taxpayer will be. This fiasco is rooted in government incompetence. It was Taoiseach Simon Harris who gave the go-ahead for the contract with BAM in 2017. Then in 2019, despite the big concerns and problems that had already emerged, he again gave the developer his seal of approval by signing the contract for phase 2 of construction. This is the source of all of the problems that have beset the building of the hospital. Weak contracts that don't protect the public purse, don't hold the developer to delivery dates, and don't allow for effective oversight of the project. Ceann Comhairle, who signs a contract for anything, let alone a hospital, without any idea of what the final cost will be or when the job will be finished? The answer to that question is Simon Harris. Yesterday, the Taoiseach said that government won't be a pushover on the Children's Hospital. Of course, that's just another soundbite. The horse has truly bolted on that score. So let's go through it. The completion date has been delayed 17 times. The spending on the hospital has ballooned by €1.5 billion. According to the board overseeing the project, not one of the hospital's 5,000 rooms have been completed to standards set out in the contract. And most importantly, the hospital still isn't open. Not a single child has been treated despite the billions of public money spent. That's not a government being pushed over. That's a government being rolled over repeatedly. RSA Simon Harris agus an rialtas atá freagrach as an braseach of winning le ospedale náisiúnta na Báistí. Minister, everybody in the Dáil wants the hospital finished, and we want its doors open for children. The scandal of children with scoliosis and spina bifida waiting years in agony for their operations remains front and centre. The hospital should be open for them and for so many other children in need of care and treatment. Of course, BAM must step up to the plate and fulfil all contractual obligations. But be clear, it is the job of government to protect the public interest. When it comes to the delays and the ballooning costs, the buck stops with you, with government. So, Minister, can you tell us, what are you doing now to ensure that government doesn't continue to be a pushover? What are you doing now to stop the massive cost overruns? What are you doing now to ensure that this hospital gets built and opens?
Thank you. Deputy.
Deputy McDonald, for raising this issue. Week after week here in the Dáil Chamber, you and other deputies and indeed government deputies raise the ongoing concerns that we have regarding the need to meet the healthcare needs of sick young girls and boys and the improvement that we have to make in how healthcare is provided to our youngest. That is why the National Children's Hospital is so important, and that is why its completion, the provision of surgery facilities, the provision of additional care facilities, the provision of bedrooms is fundamental to how we can, in a far better way, rise to the health needs of our youngest. And that is why this hospital is needed, and that is why, when it is open, it will make a massive difference to our ability to meet the healthcare needs of our youngest, particularly those with the most difficult and sensitive healthcare needs. The message from government regarding where this project stands at the moment is very clear. We want it open as soon as possible. We want the rooms completed. We want the surgery facilities completed. We want to see a building that is currently a structure turn into a hospital, providing state-of-the-art care to those who need it the most. The progress on this hospital at the moment has been delayed, as you have said. If you look at the recent track record of delays in relation to it, due to decisions that were made by the contractor, over the last 4 years, the project has been delayed 14 times. In the last 12 months alone, it has now been delayed by 4 times. So you ask, what is the government doing in relation to this? What steps are the government taking in order to ensure that this hospital is complete, that it is meeting the healthcare needs of our children? Well, the board of the National Paediatric Hospital Development Board, the board who were responsible for the oversight of that hospital, are acting on behalf of government in relation to it. And they, on our behalf, are taking the steps that are needed to ensure the contractor is held to account and to get that hospital open as soon as possible. It is the board of the hospital who are challenging the contractor in relation to cost. It is the board of the hospital who are challenging the contractor and taking the right action to challenge the delays and to ensure that the right amount of resource is present on site in order to ensure that that hospital is open. The delays that are taking place at the moment are unacceptable. The government wants to see that hospital open. The board is acting on our behalf to take the steps that are needed to see it open, to turn it from a building to ensure that it becomes a hospital, giving care to those who need it the most. And in relation to the charges that you've made, Deputy McDonald, in relation to the Taoiseach, in relation to the government, on one hand, you say you want us to better meet the healthcare needs of the young. On the other hand, you're always against anything in relation to this hospital. On one hand, when you're saying you've got great concerns about the cost and the way the cost has gone up, but when the government takes any steps to deal with those costs, you're critical of that as well. On one hand, you say you want to see the hospital open as soon as possible, but when we take the steps that are needed to lead to that hospital getting open, you stand up here on the floor of the Dáil and you criticise that as well. It's the same old Sinn Féin. We see it again in what you're saying here today. When you're against everything, Deputy McDonald, you're for nothing.
Deputy McDonald.
Count Corla, well, we see yet again not just a grossly incompetent government, but the one that is entirely unprepared to take responsibility, much less to be accountable for anything. So it's the board's fault, it's the contractor's fault. Of course it's Sinn Féin's fault. How could it not be? So let me just recite this again. On 17 occasions, the completion date has fallen through. 1.5 billion euros of an overspend. According to the chairman, the CEO of the board, Minister, he says that there isn't one single room completed to the required standard in this project. Not one. That's his account of things. Most importantly, the hospital not open and not one child treated. I asked you a direct question. I asked you, what are you doing? What is the government doing as the custodian of the public purse, as the people accountable ultimately to have access to this healthcare for our children? What are you doing? I can only surmise, Count Corla, from the Minister's response, the government is in fact doing nothing. Having signed weak contracts with very weak levers available to the board, the government has sat back and allowed this farce and this fiasco to deepen.
Thank you.
It doesn't matter what answer I give to the House. It doesn't matter how I look to answer Deputy McDonald here today. Your response is always going to be the same. To find any answer insufficient, to find any evidence of progress or an attempt to deal with the issue not good enough. I outlined in my answer back to you the fact that we don't accept as sufficient or satisfactory where that project stands at the moment, that we too want to see that hospital open as soon as possible. And I've acknowledged at other points, and will do so again today, all of the difficulties and learnings that we have had in relation to the cost of that hospital, which have been acknowledged and taken on board in relation to how we cost other projects. But you asked me what the government was doing in relation to it, and I explained to you what the government is in relation to it, is doing. I pointed out to you that the government, through the development board that has responsibility for that hospital, is taking the action that is needed in relation to the timeliness of delivery of it, in relation to the challenge of claims, and in relation to the work that we are doing, what we are demanding of the developer to have that work done. And I put it to you, Deputy McDonald, that you are better off. You'd be better off making the case for this project being completed than continually coming out here and doing the work of the contractor on behalf of them in terms of supporting the children of Ireland and getting this hospital complete.
Now, Deputy, please. Deputy Ivana Bacik, the Leader of the Labour Party.
Minister, I want to ask you about political accountability for what's happening with the Children's Hospital, or rather what isn't happening. I read the coverage of Minister Donnelly's letter to the Taoiseach about the latest delays to the building of the new hospital, but perhaps that correspondence could more accurately be described as a letter from Minister Donnelly to the RTE newsroom, copied to the Taoiseach. And clearly there are questions to be asked and answered about the purpose of that letter, why a letter was needed between two cabinet colleagues who presumably speak frequently. But regardless, we're led to understand from the text of the letter that Minister Donnelly is very angry at the continued delays to this vital infrastructure. Minister Donnelly's not alone. We're all angry. All of us want to see the Children's Hospital built. But it's not for the Minister, or indeed for you, Minister, to be angry or to take offence at these issues like a bystander. It's simply not good enough for you to comment, as you've just done, that the delay is unacceptable, as if you had no role or no oversight or no accountability. Your job as a government, the Health Minister's job as Health Minister, is to take charge of this, to ensure that this hospital is built, rather than engaging in what seems to be a sort of unedifying psychodrama played out in letters to the press. With an endless litany of delays and of cost overruns, people are losing faith in your government's capacity to deliver on major public projects. Minister, we won't be able to see the sun soon for all the kites that are being flown in government buildings in the advance of the budget, but none of those kites ever seem to result in delivery, either of the Children's Hospital or indeed of other much-needed projects, the homes that need to be built, the upgrades to public transport that is so badly required. And I'm thinking of the Taoiseach's recent kite flying about a new department for infrastructure. And respectfully, Minister, it seems to many of us that your department, the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, should in fact be delivering on infrastructure, because that's what your department is for. That's what your department is for. And indeed, your department has questions to answer about the cost overruns and delays in the Children's Hospital. I'm looking back at previous concerns raised about why the Chief Procurement Officer, who sat on the board of the hospital, did not inform you as Minister about cost overruns some years ago, when this first started becoming an issue. But beyond the cost overruns, there are other serious issues. We see a leaked report today by KPMG questioning the capacity of Children's Health Ireland to run the hospital whenever it is finally built, partly attributed to the delays, these extraordinary delays in construction. Of course, it does appear that there is blame lying with the developer BAM. But again, we in the Oireachtas, we in the opposition, Minister, have to ask the question, what are you as the government going to do about these delays? What is the Health Minister going to do? What does his predecessor, the Taoiseach, do? Or his predecessor, Deputy Varadkar? And Minister, what will you propose to do as Public Expenditure Minister? Will you protect public procurement from third parties that lowball cost estimates at tender stage and then continually revise figures upwards? And can you say now when the Children's Hospital will be delivered and how much it will cost?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
And in your question to me, you made reference to all of the other projects that are underway across our country, whether it be homes, whether it be the delivery of public transport, and in many cases, the delivery of capital projects by this government happens in the way the public wants, happens on time, and despite the surge in inflation that we have seen in recent years, many of these projects do happen in line with the expectations that we have for their cost. But of course, all the difficulties in relation to the delivery of this hospital, in relation to the change in cost, in relation to the delay of it, I've already acknowledged, and will do so again, what we have learned from it, and for projects of this scale, what we are now doing differently in relation to our tendering and our procurement processes. The fact that we have completely different projects in place now, processes in place for other big projects of scale, like a metro, like the National Broadband Plan, that reflect the learnings that we had from the delivery of the Children's Hospital. But you ask, what steps are the government taking to ensure this hospital is delivered? Because as you rightly say, Deputy, the most important thing now is how we learn from what has happened and how we get the hospital open, how we get it providing care to young, sick children. But what steps are we taking in relation to it? Two main steps are being taken. Firstly, in relation to the cost of the hospital, the board of the National Children's Hospital, acting on behalf of the government, continues to challenge claims that are put in relation to costs that are being accrued in the delivery of that hospital, and is successful in getting better value and better outcomes for the taxpayer in challenging many of those costs. In relation to what we are doing for the timeliness of the hospital as well, the board have within their ability to withhold certain payments to the contractor in order to ensure that timelines are delivered even at this point. And this is something the board both does and continues to consider doing in the future to ensure we get closer to that point of that hospital being open and children receiving the healthcare that they need and deserve.
Thank you, Minister.
Minister, clearly children do need this hospital built. We all need to see this hospital built, and all of us want to see it built. We want to see it open and delivering the necessary services. But it's just not good enough for you as Minister for Public Expenditure or for the Health Minister to simply say that this is what the board is doing, and not to reassure people what you're doing to ensure an outcome here. Because I think what's frustrating people is the lack of outcome, the lack of accountability, and the constant impression of passing the buck, of blaming others for cost overruns and delays. And there is here a pattern, because the Health Minister is the government line minister who's politically responsible and accountable for the spend in health. But every time another health scandal or cost overrun hits the headlines, the Health Minister is nowhere to be seen. When the cost-saving recruitment embargo transformed into a suppression strategy whereby 2,000 vacant posts are being quietly abolished, the Health Minister was nowhere to be seen. And when that embargo was debated earlier this year, it was more often than not the former Taoiseach who went out to bat for it. And the annual health budget has become a joke. It's such a fiction. And yet, every day, we see hundreds of people still on trolleys waiting for beds, childhood spent on waiting lists, crowded A&Es, and appalling tragedies like the awful, awful death of Aoife Johnston. So, Minister, it's not good enough to be saying this is what the board are doing. What we want to hear is what government are doing to ensure this hospital will open.
The board is a representative of the state here. The board are taking action on behalf of government. You know that well. You know that is the case. You're making a claim there regarding the government not being involved in it, despite the fact that the board of the hospital is acting on behalf of the government. In relation to the charges you made regarding the performance of our health services at the moment, of course, what you neglected to say in the charges that you made against Minister Donnelly and the government is that 2023 was the second year in a row that waiting lists fell for key procedures in our hospital, that we have seen a reduction of almost 1/3 in the waiting times for really important procedures, and that we're seeing a reduction in outpatient waiting lists, despite the big increase that we are seeing for the demand of healthcare in the aftermath of the pandemic. So that is the record of us in relation to healthcare. Minister Donnelly, as the Minister for Health, has been instrumental in the delivery of those improvements, just as he has been instrumental in the agreement that we have reached regarding the better funding of healthcare services in Ireland for this year and for next year. In each of the answers I've given back to the Dáil here this afternoon on this topic, I have acknowledged what should have went better in relation to this hospital. I've acknowledged my role in it, and I've acknowledged what we have done to try and fix it for the future and ensure that learnings are learnt in relation to it. But what I've also emphasised is the steps the government are taking to minimise cost at this stage and get the hospital open as soon as possible.
Thank you. Deputy Boyd Barrett, please. Deputy Murphy. Okay.
Thanks, Ken Corla. For almost a year, Israel has been waging a genocidal war against the Palestinians. Over 40,000 people in Gaza have been murdered. And the Israeli attacks on Lebanon haven't just started in the last couple of days. They've also been escalating over the last year. Over the last year, around 1,000 attacks, around 10,000 attacks on Lebanon, resulting in the deaths of over 1,000 people. But they have now massively escalated. They are indiscriminately carpet bombing southern Lebanon. They're consciously and openly targeting civilian homes. In the last 24 hours alone, Minister, they've killed more than 500 people. They've murdered more than 50 children. And there are now tens of thousands of people desperately trying to flee out of southern Lebanon. This comes after the acts of state terrorism, thousands of walkie-talkies, of pagers blowing up across the country, maiming and killing women, children and men. And just like before the genocide in Gaza, we have public statements from the Israeli leaders telling to the world their intent to commit war crimes. The Minister for Foreign Affairs tweeting, any civilian living near Hezbollah weapons should leave their homes immediately for their own safety. An admission that they are targeting people's homes in Lebanon with exactly the same justification they have used to destroy Gaza. The Minister for Diaspora openly saying that Lebanon does not meet the definition of a country and the border needs to be changed. War crime after war crime after war crime for a year. And still, the US continues to send weapons to Israel to commit these war crimes. $20 billion of weapons agreed just last month. Is there no line that Israel cannot cross? Is a ground invasion of Lebanon coming next? An all-out regional war? Minister, will you condemn these as the war crimes that they are? Will the Taoiseach at the UN call for the US to stop sending Israeli weapons? But more than words, Minister, we need actions. Will you stop blocking the Occupied Territories Bill? Will you impose sanctions on Israel? Will you tell the Israeli ambassador not to come back? And Minister, finally, can you tell us whether any of the bombs that are raining down on Lebanon now have passed through Irish airspace? The Taoiseach told the Dáil that no airport in Ireland or Irish sovereign airspace is being used to transport weapons to the conflict. We know now, because of the ditch, that that was untrue. At least 9 flights have carried tens of tons of Israeli explosives, ammunition, detonators, parts for fighters through Irish airspace. Will the companies involved who are breaching neutrality, who are breaching the law, will they be prosecuted? Minister, can you guarantee me that no other flights, other than those 9, have gone through Irish airspace on the way to Israel? Or does the government have a don't ask, don't tell policy? Minister, we know now that at least one flight carrying weapons of war from Israel to the US stopped in Shannon Airport. Your government refuses to inspect those planes. Will you now agree to start inspections? Members of the Lebanese community in Ireland have called an emergency protest for tomorrow, 5 p.m. at the Dáil, and Saturday, 1 p.m. at the Department of Foreign Affairs.
So thank you, Deputy, for raising what is such a deeply important issue for all of us, for the Middle East and for the world. The Taoiseach, the Taoiseach and the government have been at the forefront, responding back and representing the views of the Irish people in terms of the conflict in the Middle East, what this means for the people of Gaza and what this means for the people of Lebanon. The Taoiseach and Taoiseach, and they are continuing this approach and this work in New York at the United Nations at the moment, have at every stage in this awful conflict made the case for and called for an immediate ceasefire, the release of all citizens, of all hostages, and also for unhindered and free humanitarian access to be provided to ensure that those, particularly within Gaza, those who are left, have access to the care they need in conditions that are just truly awful and terrible. The government will continue to make the case for this in the United Nations and will continue to engage with other partners within the European Union and across the world on this issue. As you're aware of the initiative that is underway from Egypt, from Qatar and from the US to try to put in place the conditions for a ceasefire. We call again for that to be adhered to and for that to happen. In relation to the point that you have made regarding the allegations regarding the passage of munitions through Irish sovereign territory, I want to again inform the Dáil that for 2023 and to date in 2024, no applications have been received or exemptions granted for the carriage of munitions of war on civil aircraft to a point in Israel. The House and the Deputy will be aware of our law in this area, the orders of 1973 and 1989, that very explicitly prohibit the passage of munitions on civil aircraft through our airspace. No permission was sought, no permission was given. Of course, I'm aware of the issues that you are raising there regarding the passage of aircraft through our space and the allegations that are being made there. And as I speak, the Department of Transport is now conducting an examination into these reports and is engaging with the carriers that were involved with those airplanes. We take any such allegations very seriously, but I go back to the substantive issue that I made there, which is our ongoing condemnation of the loss of life and our active diplomacy within the European Union and the United Nations to create the conditions for that to come to an end.
Murphy.
Minister, you cannot, with any sincerity, on the one hand, condemn the loss of life, say we're doing everything we can to push for a ceasefire, and then turn a blind eye to weapons travelling through Irish airspace against the law being used by Israel to commit these war crimes. You cannot, in all sincerity, claim to be doing everything you're doing for a ceasefire while you refuse to mention the one thing that enables Israel to do what they're doing, which is the weapons, tens of billions of dollars worth of weapons given by the US to Israel to commit these war crimes. You refuse to mention it, you refuse to answer the question. Simon Harris should use his position at the UN to call for an end to those weapons which facilitate the genocide happening and the assault on Israel. You also, Minister, didn't answer the question. Did any weapons that are currently being used against the people in Lebanon, did they pass through Irish airspace? We know that the same sort of explosives that were used in the pagers that blew up all across Lebanon, killing children, we know that those explosives, the same sort of explosives, did pass through Irish airspace. We don't know whether they were the exact same ones. And Minister, can you tell me here now, can you give me a guarantee that we're not going to find out about any further flights? Is it just the 9 flights, or has the government very, very consciously adopted a hear no evil, see no evil approach? You say the right things, you try and pander to public opinion on this, but you're not willing to challenge the role of US imperialism, including the actual passage of weapons to Israel to commit these crimes.
But even in matters of such importance, you can't park your normal tactics of allegation and division. Like this government has made clear again and again our condemnation of what is happening. It's this government, with the support of the Oireachtas, that brought forward our recognition of the state of Palestine. It's the same government that took action to protect UNGA, to ensure the distribution of food to those who need it the most. And our Taoiseach and our Taoiseach have been, as I said, in the front line within the European Union in condemning what is happening and in calling for and pushing for further action to be taken. You're looking to create the sense of some kind of a tacit support for the passage of anything through our airspace. I've reminded you of what our law is, of how it has been implemented, and confirmed to you that no permission was sought, no permission was given, nor indeed would I believe any permission would have been given. In relation to the action that will be taken in relation to it, it is, as I said, consists of the investigation that is underway, which I'm sure when it is concluded, the Minister for Transport will be able to give a report, an indication of the outcome from it on it, and will be the continued implementation of our law saying that we do not support and it is illegal for such materials to come into Irish sovereign territory or airspace.
Deputy Peter Fitzpatrick on behalf of the regional group.
Thank you very much, Ken Cola. Minister, it is time for us to recognise the profound impact that the carers means test has on the lives of carers and those who they care for, and to advocate for its abolition. The means test undermines the principle of fairness and social justice that should underpin our social welfare. This test assesses not just the needs of the person being cared for, but also the income and assets of the carer themselves. Under this system, even a modest income can disqualify carers from receiving the carer allowance, making it harder for them to maintain their financial independence. While the intention behind this test was to ensure fairness, in reality it places an unfair burden on carers, forcing them to choose between providing essential care and earning a living wage. It has inadvertently become a barrier to the very support it aimed to provide by creating a cruel paradox. Carers are penalised for trying to earn a living, even when their caregiving duties prevent them from working full-time. Caring for a loved one is not merely a responsibility, it is an act of compassion and love that often comes at a great personal sacrifice. Carers perform tasks often around the clock, without the luxury of regular working hours or financial compensation to match their effort. The means test ignores the emotional, physical and financial toll that caregiving imposes on individuals. By restricting access to financial supports, the test devalues the significant contribution carers make to society. Without carers, many people would rely more heavily on state-funded care facilities, which would increase the cost to the state. Many carers struggle to make ends meet, yet the means test cuts them off from crucial supports if their income is deemed too high or poverty threshold. It is a system that overlooks the fact that caring for someone is not just emotionally taxing, it can also be financially draining. Carers frequently face additional expenses, including medical equipment, home adaptations and transport to medical appointments, which puts immense strain on household financials. I would also like to highlight that the Carers Alliance provides more than just financial assistance. It acts as a gateway to other essential services such as free travel, household benefits and respite care. By restricting eligibility to the means test, many carers are also denied access to these critical services, making it even harder for them to manage their caregiving responsibilities. Carers often experience high levels of stress, burnout and isolation due to the demand of caretaking, whereby the financial strain imposed by the means test exacerbates these issues. And this disproportionately affects women, who make up the majority of carers, and those from low-income backgrounds, who are already vulnerable. This test creates a disincentive to engage in employment or pursue professional development, trapping carers into precarity. Minister, you know and I know, Minister, the amount of people that's in nursing homes, and the reason in nursing homes, Minister, there's no one to care for them. The amount of people that's bed-blocking beds in hospitals is the same thing. Carers, to me, Minister, is a vocation, and I am asking you, Minister, for your government to abolish the mean test. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you very much, and thank you for raising this really important matter. And we all know, as you do, that those who provide care in our country to loved ones within the community make an invaluable contribution to supporting those who need help, and also by doing that to complementing the work of the state and indeed alleviating pressure on our hospitals, on nursing homes, without whom the work of our carers, the pressures they face would even be bigger. But I have to say, in fairness to my colleague, the Minister for Social Protection, this is an issue that she really understands. And I'll come on to the issue that you're raising in relation to the means test for a moment. But due to her recognition of this issue and the work that the government has done in recent years, it's the reason why the carers allowance and the carers benefit have been increased now by €29 per week over a number of budgets. It's the reason why the carers support grant was increased now to €1,850, which is the highest level it has been in the history of the state. And given the point that you made in relation to the means testing, it's in recognition of that the income disregards have now been changed. Most recently of June of this year, when they were increased from €350 for a single person to €450 and up to €900 for carers who have a spouse or a partner. So what the government has aimed to do is to change the income disregards, recognising the issue that you face, that when you provide a means-tested payment, it can create difficulty for those who are just outside of it, and that difficulty, of course, is really added to when they're providing care for those they love in situations that are frequently very, very difficult. Finally, just to remind the House of probably the most significant change that has been made, has been the introduction now of the long-term carers contribution. doing more to help ensure that if somebody has been a full-time carer across their life, that they have a better chance of accessing the state pension later in life in recognition of what they have done. In relation to the issue that you raised there regarding getting rid of the means test, so what we've aimed to do over a number of years is increase the value of the payment and change the income disregard. In relation to the full abolition of a means test, for many social welfare payments, a means test is at the heart of how we can ensure our money goes to those who need it the most. And what the Minister has done is put in place a working group to assess this issue, and I understand the working group will come back to her and her department with a report on this issue in Q4 of this year, so before the year is out. It is a complex issue, but as we are dealing with it, we've changed the value of the payment and changed the income disregards to recognise the immense work that carers do in our country.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Fitzpatrick.
Minister, I do really thank your response, and in fairness, a lot of the things you said is very, very good. But my situation, Minister, is, and I'm sure nearly every TD in the chamber here at the moment is, the amount of people come in our constituency offices, and the problem is they've got loved ones stuck in hospitals, they've got loved ones stuck in nursing homes, and they've nobody to look after them. Like, nobody wants to be stuck in a hospital for 6 or 7 weeks just waiting for someone to look after them. There's a serious shortfall of carers out there. Like, Minister, you know, and I know, Minister, is the money. The money's good, but it's not going to put bread and butter for a family to look after a loved one. So all I'm just saying, Minister, is there is a lot of genuine people out there that do want to look after loved ones, and the means test is putting them off. And like, Minister, it's a no-brainer because it'll benefit everybody. The amount of money that the carers save the state, you're not talking about thousands or millions. You're talking about serious amount of money. And I'm just saying, there's a lot of people out there and the amount of people I know that's trying to get nursing homes and can't get in, and the amount of people they know there's nursing homes that shouldn't be in nursing homes. So, Minister, what I'm trying to say, it's a win-win for everybody. And I do put my hand up. The government has done a good job with the carers the last number of years, but I think that an awful lot could be more done. I'm just going to say, Minister, it's like there has to be an in-between. I'm just going to say, Minister, I personally, and the regional group tomorrow will say this, we do believe that the best way is to abolish the means test and try to get these people looked after. Thank you.
So I meet the same people as you do who do such great work, keeping family members out of nursing homes, keeping them out of hospital, keeping them at home, and giving them love and support. And I also see the cost and impact that it has on them as they provide that support. It's because of that we've made the changes that I outlined to you, which you've been gracious enough to recognise in your answer back there, in terms of the means testing element of what you're making the case for. The Department of Social Protection informed me that were we were to remove the means test in its entirety, the cost of that alone for the carers payment will be between 600 million and €2 billion per year. And that's just for that payment. And I'm sure that if we change the means testing for carers payments, we'd face equal calls to change it for other important social welfare payments. But as I said, in recognition of the importance of this payment and the difference that it makes, it is being examined. I'm sure that will yield back conclusions and some practical next steps. But as that is being done, I know that the Department of Social Protection, Minister Humphreys, and the broader government will try to find practical ways that we can support our carers through payments and through the other forms of support that we make available to them.
Thank you very much. That concludes leaders' questions and enables us to move on to the order of business. And in accordance with Standing Order 35, I call on the Government Chief Whip, Minister Hildegard Naughton, to move that the arrangements for the week's business be agreed to.
I move.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Not agreed. Deputy McDonald.
Thank you, Councillor. I want to reiterate the concerns that have been raised by Deputy Murphy earlier today in respect of the carpet bombing of Lebanon, the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and indeed the brutality and violence instigated by Israel in the West Bank. Minister, I believe that we need a statement from the Taoiseach, also from the Taoiseach, that we need an opportunity for questions and answers in respect of weapons of war passing through Irish airspace. I understand that at least 9 such flights have passed. You've reiterated the position that permissions were neither sought nor granted. That doesn't take from the fact that it appears this has in fact happened. There is an issue of sanction and punishment for those who have breached Irish domestic law. And then there is a wider necessity to move beyond simple condemnation from the government and into concrete action that makes absolutely clear that not alone will the Irish state condemn acts of war and genocide, that we will do everything within our power to prevent those actions occurring, including criminal sanctions, including the Occupied Territories Bill. The list is longer than that, but for these purposes, we need both the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach, who, whether wittingly or otherwise, Ceann Comhairle, gave wrong information to the Dáil on this matter. Yeah. This Dáil was misled. We will take it that it was unwittingly so, but nonetheless it happened, okay, and that has to be corrected also.
Now, Deputy Bacik, please.
Ceann Comhairle, the Taoiseach has said in recent days that homelessness is heavily impacted by the fact that many people are seeking asylum and protection here, and this is wrong, and I want to express my concern about the language. What is impacting most heavily on homelessness is government policy. Government failure to provide enough homes for people, and I think that needs to be acknowledged by government ministers. As Minister O'Gorman rightly pointed out, asylum seekers are not counted in official homelessness figures and not entitled to HAP or to other housing supports. People leaving direct provision who have status represent just a small cohort of those entering homelessness. So, Ceann Comhairle, we do need a debate on housing, but I think we need to be careful, and particularly cabinet ministers need to be careful in a debate on housing, not to conflate migration issues with homelessness issues, not to pass blame for homelessness figures, for the appalling figure of 4,401 children in homelessness, not to suggest that in some way that is attributable to inward migration rather than to government policy.
For over 12 months now, we've watched on with horror as depravity was rained down upon the population of Gaza by the State of Israel. Throughout that time, many of us across the opposition here, ourselves and the Social Democrats, have asked for action, for consequence. We've been met solely with words. And now, not only we find out that all the government have offered is words, but we've also blinded ourselves to what is occurring over our own airspace, where weapons of war have been transported through our airspace to rain hell down upon the population of Gaza and now southern Lebanon. It makes ourselves complicit. The Irish people are demanding, and you'll see outside the gate later on, further calls for the enactment of the Occupied Territories Bill. There has been renewed legal advice. We need a statement on this. We need ministers to be held accountable, to update the House on legal advice, to tell us why you were so wrong when you stated with such confidence that no such airplanes carrying weapons are flying through our airspace. We demand of it this week because the urgency of it matters. Thank you.
Minister, one of the oldest tricks in the book of a cynical government under pressure is the tactic of divide and conquer and scapegoating innocent people for that government's own failing. And that is what we heard from Simon Harris over the weekend when he essentially hung a target on the back of asylum seekers, people exiting direct provision and immigrants generally by suggesting the
terminology, Deputy Boyd Barrett, is not in order.
They were responsible for the housing crisis.
Sorry, Deputy Boyd Barrett. The terminology you're using is not in order, please.
He has echoed
Deputy Boyd
the scapegoating.
Deputy Boyd Barrett, will you please listen to me? You have used language that is extremely dangerous, and you're levelling accusations.
The Taoiseach used...
You are levelling allegations.
The Taoiseach used dangerous language. The Taoiseach used dangerous and dishonest language, suggesting things that are simply not true about asylum seekers and people exiting direct provision, when it is the government who have exacerbated the homelessness crisis by lifting the no-fault eviction ban and by failing to address the deficit in social and affordable housing. So why don't you ask the Taoiseach to stop scapegoating asylum seekers and immigrants and have, as we've been asking for months, the discussion that you promised we'd have on the Housing Commission report, which of course laid the blame for the housing crisis where it belongs, on the shoulders of this government.
Deputy Matthew McGrath, please.
They had a site out in the 50, 70-acre site, and Professor Sheehan said that he would build a hospital there in 11 to 13 months for 900 million to 1.1 billion. And here we are now, and you won't take accountability for the appalling mess that you have made of this. The Taoiseach actually signed the contracts with the Deputy House, and Minister Donnelly, who runs and evades and ducks and dives, is the man overseeing it, and the Secretary General of the Department of Health. Nobody is taking accountability. It's just simply outrageous. While sick children languish and lots of people languish for services, and we have this runaway train out there, and there won't be a hospital there in 2028, not to mind say 2026. You can't make a silk purse of a sow's ear. It's the wrong site, no access, no parking, no helipad, and you go fail with it and try and put a spin on it. It's an unmitigated disaster on your government, and the Fine Gael government, supported by Fianna Fáil, and Sinn Féin agreed with the site as well. They voted down the motion here to change the site, so you can all hang your heads in shame.
Deputy Catherine Connolly, please.
Chair, with the other TDs who have asked for time in relation to Palestine and Lebanon. Yes, Minister, we are complicit by our silence, despite our words and our recognition of Palestine. As a neutral country, we should be using our voice now more than ever in relation to bringing peace in the world. The EU is still trading with a country that has flagrantly breached every international law that's committing genocide. We have failed to enact two bills, the Occupied Territories Bill and the Divestment Bill. And you stand here today and tell us that you've said strong words. We need a lot more than strong words, and I, for one, will not be complicit in the slaughter that's been carried out while we trade as a European partner with Israel.
Thank you. Minister, please.
Paula, so just to deal with the different issues that were raised there. Firstly, the issues that have been raised there regarding the ongoing and terrible conflict in the Middle East and the risk of that escalating further. The Taoiseach and Taoiseach are currently in the United Nations at the moment, and I'm sure upon their return we'll be able to deal with the issues or questions that members of the House want to raise with them. But I do want to emphasise again the suggestion that has been made that the government is in some way complicit with the passage of munitions through our airspace. I want to categorically reject. You've all accepted on one hand that no requests were made and those requests were not granted, but at the same time you make allegations of complicity. You can't do both. You can't do both. You cannot do both. You can't do both. And I have no doubt at all that when upon their return from their efforts on behalf of the people that are subject to such violence, they'll be in a position to give an update to the House in relation to their efforts. But through their words and through their actions as well, we have shown our view on this issue, and we have and will continue to take either the action that we can or make the statements that are needed to try to create the conditions and play our role in this terrible war and conflict coming to an end, and those who are innocent losing their lives in the way they are at the moment. I want to just deal with the issue that has been raised there by a number of you, particularly Deputy Boyd Barrett. You know, Deputy, you can't, on one hand, stand up and make the case for divisive language and then use the phrase target on their back. That was your language. That was your language.
I didn't make the statement.
We
He did.
Do have a responsibility to ensure not only the right policies are in place, but we use the right language to describe it. What the Taoiseach has said, including in the interview, that is the cause of your question, he has talked about the rights that we have to look after those who need support. He has talked about the benefits that migration and openness bring to our country and our economy, and he has done that on many, many occasions. Regardless of where somebody comes from, regardless if they're born here, if they're making Ireland their home, if they're seeking refuge here, they have a right to expect that we'll do all we can to prevent them from being homeless and give them support, and we do it. It is the reason why the government spends over €200 million per year to try to prevent people being homeless. It's the reason why we've the largest social housing programme for many decades. And it's also the reason why our efforts to accommodate those who are looking for refuge and our ongoing efforts to provide more homes in our country are provided by 2 different government departments in our efforts to do that. We make the case for openness, we make the case for the rules in relation to migration, and we do, but also for the great benefits that migration and openness has brought to our country.
Are the arrangements as proposed for this?